I think actually it is starting to change. I think the wind has changed with regard to some of those forces. People are sick of this state of affairs, and I'm seeing more and more people who are ready to drop the politics and reach across the aisle and be friends with people, regardless of their politics or their religion. I see more and more people who are recognizing the toxic influence that being so-called too online carries with it, right? It's a fascinating thing that that term has come about now, right? Too online as a way to describe people who spend too much time online and have skewed thinking as a result. And so there's this kind of organic movement pushing back away from that. As to what's going to happen, I don't know. I think Nicholas Christakis and John Haidt both are pretty convinced that a lot rides on what happens in the 2020 election. If Trump gets reelected, for example, or even if he's impeached and Pence is elected, versus whether some intersectional feminist gets elected versus whether some mainstream person, Republican or Democrat, gets elected, what kind of class comes into the Congress. I mean, these things are going to have profound effects because right now people are so hyper attuned to politics and trying to analyze what politics mean for their lives. It'll have profound and difficult to predict effects. But at the same time, I see that the cultural wind has shifted. People don't like this contentious, polarized state of affairs and are organically trying to take steps that should mitigate the worst of it. And I think that we will see those things continuing to grow, although it's hard to say depending on what happens, how contentious this forthcoming election cycle gets. I like to see people reaching across the table and deciding to put their political and religious differences aside and try to, whether they talk about issues or not, to establish the relationships, the baseline relationships that we see one another as human, regardless of our people with values similar to our own and members of our community, friends, neighbors, that we have that baseline first, regardless of political ideology or religious beliefs or morals or whatever. I think that that's the first big step, and I'm seeing that happen very rapidly over the past few months.
I'm really glad you said that because we felt like we were seeing or at least feeling the same thing, feeling the same desire and almost desperation for civility and respect. Not agreement, just respect. And I mean, that's really the
Yeah,
entire foundation of our show. And we have been so, we're still fairly new, but so far, we have been so pleasantly surprised at how respectful and enthusiastic our audience is. I think we try really hard to cultivate an environment that doesn't that's not very that doesn't call for like trollish behavior and a lot of negativity and a lot of fighting. That's just not what we're about, and we feel like our audience gets that, and we're so excited to see that. And again, we didn't know if we were right. We're like, for all we know, everyone likes the fighting. They like the being in their own, the tribalism and all that. But from
I think
what
they did 5 years ago.
I wouldn't disagree. I think when you're, at least in my experience and a lot of people I talk to, I think when you kind of start joining the fight, which arguably a lot of people did with the rise of social media and the crazy last election and all that, I think a lot of people joined these fights and sensitive topics that they normally probably wouldn't have been as into, but their friends were into it and celebrities are into it. Everyone on social media is into it. So, hey, why not? I'll get into it too. It's exciting. It's, you're in it with your friends or your group, whatever. But then after a while, I mean, for at least some of us, like myself, like it just gets old and you start seeing real life consequences, whether it's like losing friends or family members, whatever it is. Like it gets too
Hmm.
much. And I hope you're right that a lot of other people are sensing this too. It's just become too much.
I think that's what's going on. It's definitely like it's really heavy. You start to see the consequences. It's exhausting. It's kind of embarrassing, to look back and think, did I just spend 5 years of my life mostly sitting on a computer instead of like ever going outside and yelling at strangers and things? And as you said, there's another sense to it too. That it's just boring. It's like, oh wow, you're just going to say everybody's just saying the same kind of stuff. It's like who posts their political stuff on Facebook now? It's either pages that are trying to promote that brand or pundits or like that crazy uncle that never gets it. Everybody else has just been like moved on from that. Nobody does that stuff anymore, and it's losing popularity rather than gaining it. Twitter's a little bit more toxic, but even there you're seeing norms and rules, even like within like political people Twitter, to where it's I don't think it's an accelerating problem. I think people are figuring out that it's not worth the constant tension, and that there's other aspects to life, and the self-righteous rage that they got to feel, and the in-group partisan social identity that they gained. Social identity theory is really worth looking into on tribal behavior. It wasn't worth the cost. It's too exhausting, and it's ultimately just a bunch of boring, predictable behavior. And people are looking for different stuff. And I hope what they're looking for is that, building that network of community ahead of other agendas more than anything else. Agreeing or disagreeing is secondary. It's even having conversation about difficult topics is secondary to building that network of community and friendship and respect and humanity. I think that's the first thing, and that's what people are craving most.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.